I don't think you can say much more than this has been one of the worst weeks ever for the Liberals when it comes to their popularity in Canada. I'm not sure if you've seen the recent Nanos poll, but it's quite amazing. The Conservatives are currently at 41% in the polls, and the Liberals and NDP are tied at 22%. I believe the Liberals are like literally point like 1-3 ahead of the NDP, but at this point it doesn't matter. If anything, the NDP could actually overcome the Liberals and win more seats when they're tied. The current seat projections favor the Liberals, but that's because it takes into account financial information and a bunch of other stuff. But at least the NDP has very concentrated support, whereas the Liberals are a little bit more like the Conservatives, where they have kind of support sort of strewn across the country. Not as much as the Conservatives, which is why the Conservatives need to win by massive margins in order to win a majority, where the Liberals can win while being behind in the polls. But regardless, it's awful. I don't need to put a finer point on it. But what I want to talk about today is how the current Liberal Party of Canada is trying to overcome this really bad polling deficit. And you might think, well, what are they going to do? Maybe make some economic reforms, do some sensible policy, a repeal saying, okay, guys, this didn't work, and now we're going to go in this new direction. Prove that they're adults who can understand that certain policies of theirs aren't really working and that they can pivot on the fly. That would be the sensible thing to do. That's what I've suggested that they should do, even if I'm a conservative. I make these suggestions to the Liberals because I like political strategy, and I also know that the Liberals will never listen to me, so it's never going to actually hurt the Conservatives' chances of winning, because the Liberals are clearly not listening. I get videos with like 20,000 views, and I can guarantee not a Liberal staffer is willing to watch more than 30 seconds of me. But the current Liberals, they have chosen the path of their own destruction, which is to double down on accusations of against both the Conservative Party as being a far-right ultra-MAGA party and trying to belittle Canadians for voting for the Conservatives, because these two things are effectively intertwined. You cannot basically slam the Conservative Party as far-right MAGA extremism. They don't care if babies die kind of stuff. Which is ironic when I said that, considering the Liberal Party's hyper pro-abortion. But like when they go after the Conservatives as basically being a party of demons or whatever, like the current thing that they're talking about, by implication, they're saying Canadians are bad people for supporting them, or at least that Canadians are stupid. I don't think Canadians are stupid. I think it's very sensible for Canadians to be supporting the Conservative Party of Canada. But the Liberals are effectively implying it by saying all these hyperbolic things about the Conservative Party. So it even started back with, well, actually, we talked about this on stream yesterday, but I do want to bring it up because of how ridiculous it is. We have Ken Hardy, an MP for the Liberal Party, saying, beyond troubling to see another mass shooting in Canada, now in Winnipeg, and we've lost so many police officers. Might it be the antisocial, burn everything down, far-right attitude we're seeing creeping in from the U.S. and that creep on the Canadian side? Pierre Poilievre? It's like, guys, this is not a winning strategy. Implying that your opposition leader is causing mass shootings doesn't actually make your opposition leader look bad. It makes you seem like crazy people. And most people who see a tweet like that are saying, didn't you guys lower mandatory minimums for multiple crimes and even eliminate mandatory minimums for gang members illegally possessing firearms? I don't know what happened with the Winnipeg shooting right now, but with the vague details we currently have, I don't think it's wrong for Canadians to respond to that tweet by saying, you guys are the soft on crime people. How is this Poilievre's fault? He would have locked up the criminal, presumably, who did this if it was a situation where the person had a record. But whatever. It's somehow the Conservatives' fault. And I don't think they know how badly this is going to play. But that's more of a fringe Liberal talking point against the Conservatives. Here's the mainstream one. It came from the Liberal Twitter or X account itself. So we have here Justin Trudeau saying, well, Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives turn their backs in favor of following far-right American-style politics. Liberals will always support Ukraine. And this is on this silly issue going on right now, where the Conservatives voted against a trade deal piece of legislation with Ukraine because it was including a bunch of carbon tax rhetoric. Now, people are somewhat correct to say, well, it's just a vague commitment for the carbon tax, and it's not actually imposing a carbon tax, and Ukraine technically already has a carbon tax. Okay, but if you know anything about political strategy and marketing, you would know that if the Conservatives vote for this, the Liberals all day long would be saying, see, the Conservatives support the carbon tax. They're hypocrites. They just voted in favor of the carbon tax because they know it's secretly good. So they created basically a lose-lose scenario for the Conservatives, where if they don't vote for it the way that they didn't, basically they're anti-Ukraine, even though Conservative MPs tend to be the most pro-Ukraine, and they were pro-Ukraine even back when Putin invaded Crimea and eastern Ukraine, which, so like, ironically enough, no liberal basically spoke out against, because they don't actually care. They only care now that it's the media's new thing to support Ukraine. It's not bad to support Ukraine, but there's a lot of virtue signaling going on in terms of the Ukraine support from people who never in their life actually cared before 2022, and if anything, actually contributed to the invasion happening by being so weak on foreign policy. But now the liberals have created some bill, though it makes them look like the pro-Ukraine ones and the Conservatives not. Again, this is not going to work. And the use of just American style politics as a slogan against the Conservatives is so silly, considering that the only parties who have been inviting American politicians to speak at their conferences have been the Liberals and the NDP. Probably the Greens too, but I don't really give a crap what happens at their conferences. Nobody watches those. The NDP had Bernie Sanders come in via Zoom call to speak at their convention in favor of democratic socialism and whatnot. That's not American style politics. Neither is the Liberals bringing in Hillary Clinton to talk about politics and then have her basically deployed to try and compare the Conservative Party to the far right MAGA movement, blah, blah, blah. Who cares? They'll have the Conservatives invited Donald Trump or Ted Cruz or Ron DeSantis to speak at their conferences? No, because the Conservatives are focused on things happening in Canada. It's actually the Liberals and the NDP who want to LARP as American politicians by trying to associate themselves with each other. But I digress. Here's another tweet from everyone's favorite MP, Mark Garrettson, and he says, Pierre Poilievre is importing far-right American politics into Canada after spending the afternoon defending themselves. These the CPC MPs that were bullied into voting against Ukraine? Nobody was bullied. You guys technically played a dishonest trap in which you were going to accuse the Conservatives of acting in bad faith regardless. And again, most Canadians are not following vote-by-vote stuff. I think people's voting records do count. And I can do a shameless plug right now. I'm running for the Conservative Party nomination for the riding of Calgary Signal Hill. So buy Conservative Party nomination, like Conservative Party memberships to vote for me. The link to my campaign website's in the description. I look into my opponent's voting records because a lot of them are frankly abysmal. But the average voter, unless you directly inform them how politicians voted, are not going to care. And unless the Liberals are going to, kick into high gear before the next election, just trying to tell Canadians how they voted on this one piece of legislation, no Canadian's really going to even know that the Conservatives voted this way. And most of them at the end of the day are going to understand why they voted against the bill. It's not going to get any Canadians to, side against their own interests of, wanting grocery prices to come down, getting rid of the carbon tax, and, beefing up Canada's military. That's the funny thing. The Liberals and the NDP keep pushing to cut military spending so that we can be less of a use to our allies. But no. They're the real pro-Ukraine ones. Whatever. And then here's a National Post article, and it's just laying out this thing that happened where a Tory MP, I can look up who it was, but basically he's been censured and not allowed to speak in Parliament until he signs some sort of apology. It's Jake Stewart. Which riding is that? He's from Mirmatch Grand Lake. And he said he called one of the Liberal MPs a Hamas supporter. So Greg Fergus, the current Speaker of the House, basically said that was unparliamentary language. Unparliamentary language at the time when the Liberals keep calling the Conservatives far right and keep implying that they're in favor of shootings and whatnot. And you even had Ken McDonald flipping off the Conservatives in Parliament. But, a Conservative pointing out that a Liberal who never actually condemns Hamas and doesn't say anything about all the massacred Jewish people in southern Israel, that's way over the line to say that person might have some Hamas sympathies. But whatever. Now I want to get to the most ridiculous point that was made recently in Parliament to try and go after. Actually, no, not that. Not yet. You guys are going to have to wait for it. It's quite brilliant. Also, I just want to do another quick shameless plug. I have a legal fund going on right now. It's on the Give, Send, Go link in the description below. I'm being sued by a billionaire right now. I'm winning that lawsuit, but I am now $25,000 deep in defending myself. I just got over my deposition. It went extremely well. My opponent's deposition went very poorly, and they basically had to agree to every single factual point we had against him in that. I'm defending myself in this defamation case, but the guy coming after me is not equipped to be making accusations. Let's say that. But if you can chip in some money, that really helps me. Anyways, I want to get to this this Mark Garretson clip where he's speaking in Parliament. I might not play the entire clip because it's a bit long, but I just want you guys to hear just Mark Garretson, Marky Mark and the Sweaty Bunch, making these accusations directly out loud, because it's just, I don't know, it's just so desperate that even just hearing him say these things.
Mr. Speaker, it has become clear that far-right American politics have fully taken over the Conservative Party of Canada. Last June, 5 Conservative MPs traveled on a lavish trip to London, England, and dined on thousands of dollars worth of oysters and champagne. We also know that at least one of those Conservative MPs had his expenses paid for by the Danube Institute, a right-wing Hungarian think tank that has said the stakes of the Russia-Ukraine war are not Ukraine's sovereignty, but a victory of NATO, the expansion of the U.S. deep state, and wokeism. Coincidentally, right around the same time, Conservative MPs started shifting their support away from Ukraine in favor of Russian propaganda aimed at turning the world against Ukraine. Mr. Speaker, I want Ukrainian Canadians to know that while Conservative MPs flirt with Vladimir Putin and his attempts to persuade their support, Liberals are unwavering in our commitment and will be there every step of the way until...
Yeah, they're going to be there every step of the way, except back in 2014 when they couldn't care less if Ukrainians were being slaughtered. Other than that, just lie about the conservative support for Ukraine, he never actually gave an example of far-right politics. He just kind of like machine guns that out, like they're diving into far-right American politics. Also a great diplomatic move to keep implying that your southern neighbor is far-right, so much so that it's a talking point that your opponents are potentially evil for being any bit like them. Oh, great idea. Just start slandering our southern allies in the United States. And then they just goes on to like talk about like, oh, did you know some conservatives, bought some food when they were in Europe or whatever? Like, who cares? Yeah, should we go through all of the Liberals' expenses? It's been far more ridiculous. Trudeau also appointed the new Governor General. I guess it's technically the Queen who did, but obviously it's the Prime Minister who chooses. Has anyone looked at her expenses, all the limousines and whatnot? Oh, of course not. Who cares? It's only bad if conservatives do something, and conservatives do it to a far lesser extent. But Mark Garretson, the funny thing about him is that you can tell he wants to be in the Liberal Party cabinet so badly. He's really living in the shadow of his dad, because his dad was an MP in the area. He became mayor of Kingston, basically off the back of his dad's legacy, and he is in Parliament every day, just like sweating it out, literally trying to just make as many drive-by shooting attacks on conservatives, hoping desperately that Justin Trudeau notices him and gives him some file that Mark Garretson couldn't possibly screw up. And even then, he probably would screw it up anyways, too. The Liberals, even the more competent ones, don't exactly have fantastic records as cabinet ministers. But anyways, I want to move on to the very best clip. It's from Liberal MP Patty Hayju, who wants to compare Pierre Poilievre to Donald Trump. And what? Did Donald Trump and Pierre Poilievre shake hands? Did they make a secret deal behind the scenes? What did they do? Have they agreed on some sort of controversial policy? Well, in fact, I'm not sure if you're even ready to hear this. It's radical. It's actually going to hurt your brain to hear how radical this is. Pierre Poilievre and Donald Trump both use the word crazy sometimes.
During question period, I heard in one of the questions from the leader of the opposition his reckless use of the word crazy as a pejorative for one of our cabinet ministers.
Or will he keep his crazy environment minister?
Could be crazy, but he's a crazy man.
I like just the idea that, well, if he's taking a page out of Donald Trump's playbook. Donald Trump's playbook, I guess, if you turn to page 10, it just says, say crazy sometimes. I don't even know what they're getting at. This is so much below reaching for straws. This is just sort of trying to reach for, like, fictitious straws. Nobody is actually going to think that if you keep invoking Trump's name, that he's at all comparable to Pierre Poilievre. And they still haven't pointed out the specific thing about Trump that Pierre Poilievre is doing wrong and why that thing is wrong. Like, you can dislike Trump on personality reasons. Most of his policies are pretty mainstream for even Canada. It's like, illegal immigrants shouldn't come over the border. Even the Liberals just shut down Roxham Road. in Quebec because the Quebec government said, can we stop having a stream of illegal migrants coming into the country through our province? That's a mainstream position. Like what, cutting taxes? What, cutting spending? What's he actually saying? Yeah, Trump says vulgar things. Have they seen Poilievre say anything vulgar? No. Well, who cares? And they're like, well, he's attacking journalists the way Donald Trump does. No, he's not. Even Donald Trump wasn't really ever attacking journalists. He'd get into scraps because American politics can be a little bit more childish than Canadian politics because everyone wants to get an anchor job on some news network. So every journalist just comes out swinging at the press secretary and the president in every press conference that happens. But like that's not like far right American politics. It's just the fact of how press tends to work. And Pierre Poilievre, if he's emulating Trump in any way, which this is something that all American politicians do, he's pushing back on journalists being dishonest. Okay. What is he supposed to lie down and take it? That's basically what the Liberals are trying to imply. The Conservatives are trying to win the next election, and that's far right. They should be more like Aaron O'Toole and just let us win. Just lay down and die. Let Justin Trudeau win an election he shouldn't have been able to win back in 2021. That's really what they want. That's really their complaint here. Anyways, that should be it for me today. I hopefully didn't sound too sick in this video. But if you want to contribute to my Gifts and Go Legal Fund, that is linked in the description of this video below. Again, I'm $25,000 deep in this lawsuit. Denise, one of the viewers, she's been an absolute star. She actually donated over the course of like a month and a half or so. It wasn't that long. She gave me over $800, which really helped me avoid having to pay a bunch of interest on some like credit card, on my credit card and other stuff like that. So I'm not like rolling in it. It's not like I have a bunch of extra money. I basically collect up money and then immediately have to pay it off to lawyers or some other expenses. So if you can contribute in any way to that fund, that's fantastic. And if you live in the riding of Calgary Signal Hill, buy a Conservative Party membership. If you know friends or family who lives here, get them to buy a Conservative Party membership and vote for me #1 on the nomination ballot. I'm very close to putting in my paperwork and getting approved as a candidate. There's going to be a lot of people out here, and hopefully people will vote for me so we have an actual Conservative representing the riding and not just some party guy who's hung out so long in the party that he thinks he deserves a position. Anyways, well, that should be it for me today. Have a great one.